The billionaire broke down after seeing his former cleaning lady get out of a helicopter with triplets and a diamond ring. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. The crystal chandelier reflected in the windows of the Ascent Tower penthouse as Gabrielle Johnson scrubbed the French oak flooring in Jonathan Maxwell III's office. At 25, Gabrielle, the daughter of Jamaican immigrants, had secured this cleaning job at Manhattan's most prestigious building thanks to her aunt's recommendation, who had worked for the Maxwell family for decades. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, sweat beading on her forehead despite the crisp October air filtering through the ventilation system. As she polished Jonathan's polo trophies, admiring their gleam against the backdrop of Central Park's autumn colors through the floor-to-ceiling windows, she heard the elevator ping. Jonathan Maxwell III arrived earlier than usual, his Savile Row suit impeccably tailored to his athletic frame. At 32, the heir to Maxwell Investments personified Wall Street privilege, Harvard-educated, weekend polo player, and known for his casual disdain for the working class, as he called everyone below his social circle. "You have delicate hands for someone who cleans bathrooms," he commented, pouring himself a scotch while observing her. His eyes lingered on her fingers as she carefully replaced a crystal trophy. Gabrielle straightened up, suddenly conscious of her uniform. "Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. I'm almost finished here." "No rush," he said, loosening his tie and settling into his leather chair. "I'm enjoying the view." She knew he wasn't referring to Central Park. The next evening, he arrived early again, this time with pointed questions about her background, her family, her aspirations. Gabrielle found herself sharing more than she intended. "I was studying engineering at community college before my father's medical bills." She trailed off, dusting his bookshelf. "Dreams get expensive." "Fascinating," he said, genuinely surprised. "An engineer who cleans my office." When he offered her a drink, "Just one while I finish these reports," she hesitated. "My aunt would kill me if she knew I was drinking on the job," Gabrielle said, but accepted the crystal tumbler anyway. Their conversations became a routine. He would arrive early, she would still be cleaning. He asked about her thoughts on books in his library, seemed impressed by her insights. For weeks, this strange ritual continued, until one evening when Manhattan's skyline glittered like a jewelry box behind them. "You're wasted here," he said, standing too close. "Someone with your mind shouldn't be polishing my trophies." His kiss took her by surprise, pressed against the panoramic window, the city a witness below. She knew she should pull away, but something in his attention felt like validation. For once, someone from his world saw beyond her uniform. Their clandestine meetings evolved, always in his office after hours. For Gabrielle, these moments represented possibility, a connection to a world forever closed to her. For Jonathan, she would later realize, it was merely convenient entertainment. 3 months later, in early December, Gabrielle was putting away his polo highlights when a wave of nausea hit her, not the first that week. In the employee bathroom, the pregnancy test's double line emerged with terrifying clarity. The following evening, she bought a cupcake with a single candle. A pathetic attempt at making this life-altering news seem celebratory. Outside his office door, she overheard Jonathan on the phone. "The Vanderbilt engagement party?" "Of course I'll be there, darling. Just finalizing the prenup details with the lawyers next week." Her heart plummeted. Engagement? She knew their relationship existed in shadows, but she'd foolishly believed his whispers about seeing potential in her. Despite the crushing revelation, Gabrielle entered. Jonathan looked up from his computer, his focus on cryptocurrency investments. "I'm pregnant, Jonathan." The silence that followed was colder than the New York winter outside. Jonathan raised his eyes from his screen, his expression transforming from surprise to irritation and finally to contempt. "And you expect what exactly?" "That I'll abandon my engagement to the Vanderbilt heiress to raise a child with someone who cleans my bathrooms." He laughed. a humorless sound that cut Gabrielle deeper than any blade. "I thought what we had meant something," she whispered, one protective hand over her stomach. "What we had." "Gabrielle, people like you are temporary in the lives of people like me. Did you really think a Maxwell would mix with someone from the Bronx? You're dull, predictable, without the refinement my circle requires. Your greatest achievement has been not breaking my Swarovski collection while dusting it." He opened a drawer, pulled out a checkbook, and filled it out with quick, precise movements. $50,000. More than you'd earn in 5 years. Take care of your little problem, and never mention my name again. When Gabrielle hesitated, refusing to take the check, Jonathan pressed a button on his desk. "Security? We have a situation in the penthouse." 2 burly men in dark suits appeared within minutes, while Jonathan was already on another call. "Harriet? I need you to find a new cleaning company." "Yes, immediately. We've had an unpleasant incident." As she was escorted out, Gabrielle heard Jonathan's laughter. "You can bet she won't be a problem for us anymore. These poor people always have their price." In her tiny one-bedroom Bronx apartment shared with 2 other women, Gabrielle cried until exhaustion overtook her. The check, torn to pieces in the trash can, symbolized her refusal to be bought, but did nothing to diminish the terror of her situation. Unemployed, without health insurance, and with a baby on the way. The first ultrasound brought a surprise that made her grip the nurse's hand tightly. It wasn't 1 baby, but 3. Triplets. That freezing January night, alone in the public hospital waiting room, Gabrielle made a decision that would change everything. "My children will never, ever know the humiliation I felt today," she promised, her eyes still wet but now carrying a steel determination. "And one day, Jonathan Maxwell will discover the monumental mistake he made." The following months were a test of endurance. Evicted from her apartment when she couldn't pay rent, Gabrielle slept in shelters while working 2 jobs: McDonald's attendant during the day and night receptionist at a roadside hotel. Her growing belly generated judgmental looks and whispers wherever she went. During a particularly long shift at the hotel, she met Eleanor Richards, a technology executive who had missed her flight and needed to stay overnight. Noticing Gabrielle's interest in the online courses she was taking on her laptop, Eleanor initiated a conversation that would change Gabrielle's fate. "You're interested in technology?" Eleanor asked, seeing Gabrielle's eyes lingering on her screen. "I always dreamed of studying engineering. I was taking community courses before everything changed." Eleanor observed the pregnant young woman, her proud posture despite the circumstances. "I'm starting a training program for underrepresented women in technology. It would be difficult with 3 babies, but if you have the determination I think you have, I can offer you a spot." It was the first time in months someone had looked at Gabrielle and seen potential, not pity. When Alexander, Marcus, and William were born in May, premature but healthy, Eleanor was there, not just as a mentor, but as a godmother. Her program allowed Gabrielle to work remotely while learning programming, data analysis, and technology project management. At the triplets' christening, held in a small Bronx chapel, Gabrielle made a silent vow as she held her 3 sons. "One day you'll walk through doors that men like Jonathan Maxwell never imagined we could open. And when that day comes, he'll know exactly what he lost." While holding the positive pregnancy test in that opulent office overlooking Central Park, Gabrielle couldn't have imagined that 15 years later her name would be on the penthouse of an even taller skyscraper, looking directly at the office where Jonathan Maxwell had humiliated her. That night, in her small apartment, Gabrielle stared at the torn pieces of Jonathan's check in the trash can. $50,000, the price he'd placed on erasing his responsibility, on erasing her. Each fragment represented a piece of the dream she'd foolishly allowed herself to believe, that someone like Jonathan Maxwell could see her as more than invisible help. Her roommates' voices filtered through the thin walls as they discussed her situation in hushed but audible tones. "I can't believe she got herself knocked up," whispered Tanya, the waitress who worked double shifts at the diner 2 blocks over. And by some rich guy? That never ends well. She can't stay here, replied Monica, who worked retail at Macy's. I'm not living with crying babies. Besides, she already missed last month's rent. Gabrielle pressed her palms against her abdomen, still flat but harboring the secret life within. Tomorrow she would face them, but tonight she allowed herself to cry until her pillow dampened and her eyes swelled shut. The confrontation came over breakfast, as Gabrielle stirred instant coffee in the chipped mug her father had given her before he passed. Look, Gabrielle, Monica began, avoiding eye contact. We talked it over. You've got 2 months to find another place. We can't afford to cover for you, and this apartment is too small for babies. I understand, Gabrielle replied, her voice steadier than she felt. I'll be out before then. But finding affordable housing in New York as a pregnant, unemployed woman proved nearly impossible. Each application rejection felt like another door slamming in her face. By early February, with her savings depleted and her belly beginning to show, Gabrielle gathered her remaining possessions into a single suitcase and checked into a women's shelter in the South Bronx. The shelter was clean but desolate, a converted elementary school with narrow cots lined up in what had once been a gymnasium. At night, she could hear other women crying, praying, sometimes arguing. She kept to herself, using the shelter's outdated computer to apply for jobs during designated hours. After 17 rejections, the McDonald's on East 149th Street hired her as a morning shift worker. The manager, a tired-looking woman named Diane, glanced at Gabrielle's growing belly with skepticism. How far along? Almost 4 months, Gabrielle answered, trying to stand straighter. You'll need a doctor's note when you hit 7 months and don't expect special treatment, Diane said, sliding over the paperwork. Training starts tomorrow at 5 a.m. Standing for 8-hour shifts left Gabrielle's ankles swollen and her back aching, but the paycheck, meager as it was, meant she could start saving again. When a night position opened at the Sunshine Motor Lodge near the expressway, she took that too, working from 7 p.m. until midnight, catching 4 hours of sleep before her McDonald's shift began. Her routine became mechanical. McDonald's till 1 p.m., sleep from 2 until 6, the motel from 7 to midnight, back to the shelter to collapse until her 4 a.m. alarm. The only breaks in this exhausting cycle were her prenatal appointments at the public health clinic. It was during one such appointment in mid-March that Gabrielle received news that momentarily stopped her heart. Ms. Johnson, I'm seeing 3 distinct heartbeats, the technician said, moving the ultrasound wand across Gabrielle's now prominent belly. You're carrying triplets. Gabrielle gripped the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath her fingers. Triplets. Are you certain? The technician nodded, pointing to the screen. Baby A, baby B, and baby C, all with strong heartbeats. After the appointment, Gabrielle sat alone on a bench in a small park across from the clinic. March winds whipped through her thin jacket as reality crashed over her. One baby had seemed impossible enough. How could she possibly care for 3? Snow began to fall, delicate flakes melting as they touched her warm cheeks, indistinguishable from her tears. But as the cold seeped through her clothes, something hardened within her. She placed both hands protectively over her stomach. My children will never know the humiliation I felt, she whispered to the babies growing inside her. You will never be unwanted. You will never be someone's inconvenience to be paid away. That evening at the Sunshine Motor Lodge, Gabrielle struggled to maintain her professional demeanor despite crushing fatigue. Her uniform, a polyester button-up that no longer closed properly over her belly, was pinned together with safety pins she'd borrowed from the shelter's communal supplies. The night was quiet until shortly before midnight, when a sleek town car pulled up to the entrance. A woman in an impeccable pantsuit entered, her designer luggage a stark contrast to the budget accommodation. I need a room for the night, she said, sliding her platinum credit card across the counter. My flight to San Francisco was canceled due to the storm. Of course, Ms. Richards! Gabrielle replied, processing the card. "We have a business king available on the second floor." While Gabrielle prepared the keycard, she noticed the woman had opened her laptop and was working on what appeared to be complex code. Unable to hide her interest, Gabrielle found herself staring at the screen. "Are you familiar with Python?" the woman asked suddenly, catching Gabrielle's gaze. Embarrassed at being caught, Gabrielle nodded. "I was studying computer science before life happened." I recognized the syntax. The woman, Eleanor Richards, according to her credit card, studied Gabrielle with new interest, taking in her makeshift uniform, her pregnant state, and the textbook partly hidden beneath the counter. "What's that you're reading?" Gabrielle hesitated before pulling out the dog-eared copy of Introduction to Algorithms she'd found at a second-hand shop. "Just trying to keep up with the field, even if I can't attend classes right now." Eleanor's eyebrows rose. "That's not light reading, especially not for someone working 2 jobs." She glanced at Gabrielle's name tag, then at her belly. "How far along are you?" "Almost 5 months," Gabrielle answered, then added without planning to, "with triplets." Eleanor's expression softened momentarily before becoming purposeful. She reached into her purse and extracted a business card. "I'm the founder of TechBridge Solutions. We're launching a program for women underrepresented in technology, full scholarships, remote learning options, and stipends for childcare." She placed the card on the counter. "It would be challenging with 3 newborns, but if you have even half the determination I suspect you do, we'd be interested in your application." Gabrielle stared at the card as if it might disappear. "Why would you offer this to someone like me? You don't know anything about my qualifications." "I know you're reading graduate-level algorithms while working night shifts at a budget motel while pregnant with triplets," Eleanor replied. "That tells me more about your qualifications than any resume could." For the first time in months, someone was looking at Gabrielle and seeing potential. Not a problem. Not a charity case. Not someone to be pitied or discarded. The following week, Gabrielle submitted her application to TechBridge between shifts. By early April, she had been accepted into the program with a modest stipend that allowed her to reduce her McDonald's hours, though she kept the night job at the motel. Eleanor became a regular presence in Gabrielle's life, often staying at the Sunshine when traveling between New York and San Francisco, using those opportunities to mentor Gabrielle personally. She helped secure a small subsidized apartment through a TechBridge partner organization, rescuing Gabrielle from the shelter just as her pregnancy entered its final trimester. On a warm May evening, 3 weeks before her due date, Gabrielle felt the first contractions. Eleanor, who happened to be in New York for a conference, drove her to the hospital herself. Alexander arrived first, small but vocal, followed by Marcus 7 minutes later, and finally William, the quietest of the 3. They were premature but surprisingly healthy, each weighing just over 4 pounds. "They're fighters," the nurse commented as she placed William in Gabrielle's arms alongside his brothers. "Just like their mama." Eleanor was there through it all, not just as a mentor, but becoming a godmother to the boys. Her program allowed Gabrielle to work remotely while learning programming, data analysis, and technology project management, skills she practiced during precious moments when all 3 babies miraculously napped simultaneously. 2 months after the triplets' birth, they were christened in a small Bronx chapel. Gabrielle had saved for weeks to buy them matching white outfits, and Eleanor had gifted 3 tiny silver crosses. As sunlight streamed through stained glass, casting rainbow patterns over the sleeping infants, Gabrielle made a silent vow. Looking down at Alexander, Marcus, and William, each with hints of Jonathan's features but somehow entirely her own, she promised, "One day you'll walk through doors that men like Jonathan Maxwell never imagined we could open. And when that day comes, he'll know exactly what he lost." That night, holding her business card like a talisman, Gabrielle couldn't know this would be the first piece of the empire that would one day make Jonathan Maxwell beg for a meeting with her. That night, holding Eleanor's business card like a talisman, Gabrielle fell asleep with her sons nearby in the small apartment she'd secured with her mentor's help. The business card represented more than just contact information. It was the first fragment of a bridge leading away from her past and toward a future she was still afraid to fully imagine. 3 weeks later, on a sweltering June morning, Gabrielle awoke to 3 distinct cries. Alexander, Marcus, and William, though barely 2 months old, already showed subtle differences in their personalities. Alexander, firstborn and seemingly aware of it, demanded attention with powerful wails. Marcus, more methodical even in infancy, cried in rhythmic bursts. William, the quietest, whimpered softly, as if apologizing for the inconvenience. "I'm coming, my loves," Gabrielle whispered, her body aching from the 3 hours of sleep she'd managed between feedings. The cramped studio apartment, a miracle of Eleanor's connections, barely contained the essentials. A bed for Gabrielle, 3 second-hand cribs arranged in a tight semicircle, a small kitchen table doubling as her desk, and a bathroom with temperamental plumbing. But it was clean, safe, and, most importantly, hers. Navigating the morning routine had become a carefully choreographed dance. Gabrielle changed and fed Alexander first, while soothing Marcus with gentle bounces of his bassinet using her foot. William, patient even then, watched with wide eyes that seemed to absorb everything. "You're the observer, aren't you?" she murmured to William as she finally lifted him for his turn, "taking it all in before making your move." As the summer heat intensified, Gabrielle established a rhythm around her baby's schedules. While they napped, those precious moments when all 3 miraculously slept simultaneously, she hunched over her laptop, working through Eleanor's program modules on coding fundamentals and system architecture. Eleanor visited every other weekend, bringing supplies that Gabrielle was too proud to ask for but desperately needed: diapers, formula, a more efficient breast pump. "I brought something else," Eleanor said one Saturday, pulling out a used but functional tablet. "For reading technical papers while you're feeding them. Multitasking is going to be your superpower." During one midnight feeding session, Gabrielle propped the tablet against a pillow while Marcus nursed. She scrolled through an article on energy storage algorithms, an area that had fascinated her since her community college days. "Look at this inefficiency," she whispered to Marcus. "The conversion rate drops at higher temperatures, but nobody's addressing the thermal management from first principles." Marcus blinked sleepily at her, one tiny hand wrapped around her finger. "You think I'm right, don't you? We could optimize this." She smiled down at him. "Maybe you'll be my mathematician someday." The first months passed in a blur of exhaustion, determination, and tiny victories. By the time the triplets reached 6 months, Gabrielle had completed the initial modules of Eleanor's program with scores that surprised even her mentor. "You're processing these concepts while sleep-deprived and caring for 3 infants," Eleanor remarked during a video check-in. "Imagine what you'll accomplish when they're sleeping through the night." "If that day ever comes," Gabrielle laughed tiredly, William dozing against her shoulder while she gently rocked the double bassinet containing his brothers with her foot. On a crisp October morning, when the boys were exactly 5 months old, Eleanor arrived unannounced with a small cake and 3 blue candles. "It's been exactly 5 months since they arrived," she explained, "and you've completed the first phase of the program. Both deserve celebration." As they shared the cake at Gabrielle's small table, Eleanor studied her protégé thoughtfully. "I've secured funding for a new initiative at TechBridge," she said. "We're focusing on renewable energy technology. The first opening is for an analyst position, part-time, remote work possible. The pay isn't extraordinary, but it's a foot in the door." Gabrielle's heart quickened. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you an interview," Eleanor corrected. "You'll get the position based on your merits, not our connection. But yes, I think you're ready." The night before her interview, after finally settling all 3 babies, Gabrielle practiced her responses in the bathroom mirror. Her reflection showed the toll of the past months: dark circles under her eyes, hair hastily pulled back, wearing the one button-up shirt that still fit from her pre-pregnancy wardrobe. "I am qualified," she told her reflection firmly. "My circumstances don't define my capabilities." She got the job. The part-time analyst position allowed her to work remotely while caring for the triplets, though part-time became a flexible concept as she often worked late into the night after the boys fell asleep. By the time Alexander, Marcus, and William celebrated their first birthday, a small gathering with Eleanor and 2 other TechBridge employees who had become friends, Gabrielle had been promoted to full-time analyst with a salary that finally allowed her to move to a 2-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood. The new apartment, though still modest, felt like a palace after the studio. The boys shared 1 bedroom with 3 cribs arranged in a row, while Gabrielle transformed a corner of her bedroom into a workspace. As the months passed, the triplets began showing distinct personalities that hinted at their future selves. Alexander took his first steps boldly, falling often but immediately getting back up. Marcus became fascinated with patterns, arranging his blocks by color before he could even speak. William, always watchful, surprised them all by speaking in complete sentences before his brothers, though he used his words sparingly. One evening, as Gabrielle bathed the boys in their small tub, Alexander splashed water that soaked the magazine she'd left on the bathroom counter. As she wiped it dry, a familiar face stared back at her. Jonathan Maxwell, featured in the business section for expanding his family's investment empire into Asian markets. "Maxwell Heir Expands Empire," read the headline. For a moment, she froze, memories flooding back. His office, his cruel words, the security guards escorting her out. The photo showed him exactly as she remembered: confident, privileged, untroubled by consequences. With steady hands, she tore the page from the magazine, careful not to let the boys see the emotion crossing her face. Later, after they were asleep, she turned the paper over and used the blank side to jot down equations for an energy storage concept she'd been developing, transforming his image into the foundation for her future. 2 years after the triplets' birth, Eleanor helped arrange their christening at a small Bronx chapel. Gabrielle had saved for months to buy them matching outfits, tiny navy blue suits that made them look like miniature businessmen. Eleanor, officially named their godmother, stood proudly beside Gabriel as the priest blessed each child individually. Alexander squirmed throughout the ceremony, while Marcus observed everything with solemn curiosity. William, true to form, remained perfectly still, his eyes following the priest's movements with unusual focus for a 2-year-old. After the ceremony, as afternoon light streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the chapel's worn wooden pews, Gabrielle gathered her sons close. Eleanor had stepped outside to take an important call, leaving Gabrielle alone with the triplets for a moment. Looking down at them, Alexander's confident stance, Marcus's thoughtful expression, William's watchful gaze, she was struck by how much they had grown and how far they had come together. She could see traces of Jonathan in them: the shape of Alexander's jaw, the intensity of Marcus's focus, the analytical quality of William's gaze. But these features had been transformed, made noble by the struggle and love that had shaped their young lives. "My beautiful boys," she whispered, kneeling to their level, "one day you'll enter through doors that men like your father never imagined we could open." She brushed a gentle hand across each small face, her voice soft but resolute. "And when that day comes, Jonathan Maxwell will know exactly what he lost." While gazing at her 3 sons in their matching suits, Gabrielle couldn't imagine that her algorithm created during late-night feedings would become the seed of a technological revolution that would one day threaten the Maxwell empire itself. While gazing at her 3 sons in their matching suits, Gabrielle couldn't imagine that her algorithm created during late-night feedings would become the seed of a technological revolution that would one day threaten the Maxwell empire itself. Yet 5 years later, that seedling had begun to sprout. Gabrielle stood at the front of the conference room, her once long hair now styled in a professional bob, wearing a navy blazer purchased on sale, but tailored to appear more expensive than it was. At 30, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had survived the impossible. The quarterly projections show a 17% increase in efficiency, she explained, pointing to the graph displayed on the screen. The team of engineers at TechBridge Solutions, where she had risen to project manager after 3 years of consistent performance, nodded appreciatively. Eleanor, now the CEO, watched from the corner with barely concealed pride. She had witnessed Gabrielle's transformation from the exhausted young mother at the budget motel to the respected professional standing before them. "Questions?" Gabrielle asked, maintaining eye contact with the senior executives in the room. Back at her modest 3-bedroom apartment in Queens, the triplets, now 5 years old, were constructing an elaborate circuit on the kitchen table under the watchful eye of Mrs. Diaz, their after-school caretaker. "Mommy!" Alexander called out when Gabrielle opened the door that evening. As always, he reached her first, charging ahead of his brothers. "We made electricity!" Marcus, methodical as ever, carefully explained their creation. "It's a parallel circuit with 3 branches, more efficient than series." William, quiet but precise, simply adjusted one of the wire connections, causing the small LED to shine brighter. Gabrielle knelt beside them, her work blazer still on. "That's remarkable engineering for 5-year-olds, she said, examining their handiwork. Each boy had contributed his natural strengths. Alexander's boldness in design, Marcus's mathematical precision, William's intuitive understanding of how components should connect. That night, after tucking the boys into their beds, they now insisted on separate beds though still sharing one room, Gabrielle settled at her desk in the living room. The news played softly on the television, a special report on an unexpected energy crisis affecting the eastern seaboard. Hospitals are implementing emergency protocols as power outages continue to affect major cities, the anchor announced. Backup generators are expected to sustain essential services for 48 hours, but officials are concerned about prolonged outages. Gabrielle's attention shifted from her work to the screen. Energy storage, her area of specialization and private passion, was suddenly the most urgent technological need in the country. For months, she had been developing an alternative energy storage system using sustainable materials, work she conducted in her limited free time, building on the algorithm she'd first conceptualized during those late-night feedings years ago. The next morning, she requested an emergency meeting with TechBridge's executive team. "I have a potential solution for the energy crisis," she stated, displaying her designs on the conference room screen. "A modular storage system that's more efficient, sustainable, and crucially deployable within days rather than months." The VP of Engineering interrupted before she finished her explanation. "This is interesting, Gabrielle, but we need expertise from our senior research team. You're a project manager, not an R&D specialist." "With respect," she continued, "I've been developing this system for 3 years. The algorithm is ready for implementation." "It's an interesting concept," said another executive, his tone patronizing, "but let's pass this to the technical leads for evaluation. They can extract any useful elements." Eleanor watched the exchange silently, her expression unreadable. Later, she found Gabrielle in her small office staring out the window. "They didn't even review the technical specifications," Gabrielle said quietly. Eleanor closed the door. "They're idiots," she stated flatly, "but they're idiots who control the company's resources." She sat across from Gabrielle. "There's another way. I know investors who specialize in crisis solutions. They move fast, evaluate on merit, not hierarchy." "Angel investors?" Gabrielle asked. "Yes. They fund promising ideas when traditional channels move too slowly. Your system deserves a chance, especially now." That weekend, while the triplets built increasingly complex structures with their circuit sets, Gabrielle prepared her presentation. Eleanor had arranged a meeting with 5 potential investors, small-scale venture capitalists looking for the next innovation. What if they don't take me seriously either? Gabrielle asked as they drove to the meeting. She had spent 2 months' clothing budget on one professional dress for this presentation. Then they're fools who'll miss the opportunity of the decade, Eleanor replied simply. The first 4 investors responded exactly as the TechBridge executives had, interested in the concept but doubtful of Gabrielle herself. Your idea has potential, said one, but you lack executive experience. Have you considered bringing in a CEO with an established track record? The 5th investor, Samuel Chen, arrived late. Unlike the others in business attire, he wore jeans and a simple button-up shirt. He said nothing during Gabrielle's presentation, but his eyes never left the technical specifications displayed on the screen. When she finished, while others asked about market positioning and competitive landscape, Chen asked about thermal efficiency rates during peak load scenarios. The system maintains 93% efficiency even at maximum capacity, Gabrielle answered, relieved to finally discuss the technical aspects. The key innovation is the thermal management protocol that prevents degradation. After the others had left, offering vague promises to be in touch, Chen remained. You developed this algorithm yourself? He asked. Yes, initially 3 years ago, but I've refined it continuously. And you have working prototypes? Small scale. I've been building them in my home workshop. Chen nodded, seemingly making calculations in his head. $500,000 for 20% of your company that doesn't exist yet. Gabrielle blinked. Excuse me? I'm offering seed funding. You'll need a proper lab, materials, a small team. The energy crisis won't wait for traditional funding rounds. 1 week later, Gabrielle signed the incorporation papers for Horizon Technologies at a coffee shop table, while the triplets drew on the backs of duplicate legal documents. Her hands trembled slightly as she formed her signature, not from uncertainty, but from the monumental significance of the moment. That same evening, she found a letter in the mail that initially seemed less significant but would prove equally life-changing. An acceptance letter from the Brookfield Academy for Gifted Children. We are pleased to inform you that Alexander, Marcus, and William Johnson have been accepted into our program for exceptionally gifted students. Their test results place them in the 99th percentile nationally. Gabrielle sat on the sofa, the letter in one hand, her laptop open to a financial planning spreadsheet in the other. The private school's tuition would consume a significant portion of her seed funding, but the opportunity for the boys was irreplaceable. Later that night, after the triplets were asleep, curiosity led her to search online for Jonathan Maxwell. The search returned recent articles about Maxwell Investments expanding into renewable energy markets, a diversification strategy to position the company for future sustainability challenges. A photograph showed Jonathan at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, still handsome but with subtle signs of aging around his eyes. He stood beside a blonde woman Gabrielle recognized from society pages as his Vanderbilt wife. With methodical precision, she took a screenshot of the article, printed it, and then used the reverse side to sketch modifications to her energy storage design. Jonathan's face disappeared beneath equations that would eventually render his company's investments obsolete. 2 weeks later, Gabrielle hired her first employee, Dr. Mei Zhang, a brilliant engineer in her 50s who had been repeatedly passed over for leadership positions at major tech firms for being too senior. They said I should consider retirement, Dr. Zhang said during her interview. I told them I was just getting started. Their loss is Horizon's gain, Gabrielle replied, recognizing in the older woman's eyes the same determination that had carried her through her darkest days. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Gabrielle and the triplets visited their new office, a small, affordable space in Long Island City with large windows and concrete floors. The boys ran excitedly through the empty rooms while Gabrielle taped a makeshift sign to the glass door. Horizon Technologies. As Alexander traced the letters with his finger, Gabrielle felt a surge of purpose. This wasn't just a company. It was the foundation of her promise to her sons. Sticking the paper sign to the glass door, Gabrielle didn't know that in less than a decade, that same logo would be valued in billions, and Jonathan Maxwell would be desperately trying to compete with the company she had built from nothing. Sticking the paper sign to the glass door, Gabrielle didn't know that in less than a decade, that same logo would be valued in billions, and Jonathan Maxwell would be desperately trying to compete with the company she had built from nothing. Yet 3 years later, that modest beginning had blossomed into something substantial. The Horizon Technologies office now occupied an entire floor in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn. Large windows flooded the open workspace with natural light, illuminating 30 employees working at clustered desks. The concrete floors remained, now polished to a soft sheen and marked with colorful tape indicating paths to different departments: engineering, development, administration, a playful touch inspired by the triplets. Gabrielle stood at the head of the conference table, reviewing quarterly projections with her leadership team. At 33, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had earned her position through innovation rather than inheritance. Her once discount store wardrobe had been upgraded to mid-range professional attire, not luxury brands, but quality pieces that conveyed competence and understated confidence. "The municipal contracts are exceeding expectations," she noted, indicating a graph on the screen. "Our storage units are maintaining efficiency even with the irregular energy demands." Dr. Zhang, now Horizon's chief technology officer, nodded in agreement. "The thermal management protocols are performing better in real-world conditions than in our simulations." As the meeting concluded, Gabrielle's phone chimed with a reminder: school pickup in 30 minutes. No matter how busy Horizon became, she maintained an unbreakable rule: she would personally collect the triplets from school at least 3 days each week. Outside Brookfield Academy, Alexander spotted her first, as always. At 8 years old, the triplets had developed distinct personalities while maintaining an uncanny synchronicity that fascinated their teachers. "Mom, we made electromagnetic generators today," Alexander exclaimed, racing ahead of his brothers. Marcus followed with his backpack meticulously organized. "Mine produced 3.2 volts. I calculated the optimal number of wire turns." William, slightly breathless from trying to keep pace, simply opened his notebook to show Gabrielle a remarkably sophisticated circuit diagram. "Can we go to the lab?" Alexander asked, already heading toward Gabrielle's modest hybrid sedan. The lab was what the boys called Horizon's development workspace. "It's prototype testing day," Gabrielle reminded them, knowing this would elicit excitement. The triplets loved watching the engineers test new iterations of the storage units. At Horizon, the boys had their own small workstation in a corner of the development lab, a space where they could experiment with child-safe components under the watchful eyes of engineers who had become extended family. It wasn't conventional childcare, but Gabrielle had built Horizon with family integration as a foundational principle. While the triplets worked on their projects, Gabrielle met with her finance director. "We've stretched the Series A funding as efficiently as possible," explained Janet Kim, sliding over a spreadsheet. "But with the new production demands, we'll need to consider Series B sooner than projected." Gabrielle was about to respond when a commotion erupted in the common area. Several employees had gathered around the television mounted on the wall, their expressions tense. On screen, a news anchor stood against a backdrop of violent storm clouds. "We're reporting live as Hurricane Eliza makes landfall in Northern California. Officials are warning of catastrophic damage to the power grid, with estimates suggesting outages could last weeks in some areas. Hospitals are implementing emergency protocols," the report continued, "but concerns are mounting about the capacity of backup generators, especially for critical care facilities." Gabrielle felt a chill as she watched footage of waves crashing against coastal infrastructure. The reporter continued, "Traditional backup generators rely on fossil fuels with limited supplies. Once these run out, there are few alternatives for sustained power." William appeared at her side, his small hand slipping into hers, Unlike his more exuberant brothers, he sensed shifts in emotional atmospheres with remarkable acuity. "Your batteries could help them, couldn't they?" he asked quietly. Gabrielle squeezed his hand. Yes, they could. Within hours, Horizon's office transformed into a crisis response center. Gabrielle established 3 priorities: identify vulnerable facilities in the storm's path, assess their current inventory for immediate deployment, and reconfigure production schedules to maximize output. "We have 73 units ready for shipment," Dr. Zhang reported, "not nearly enough for all the affected facilities." "Prioritize dialysis centers and intensive care units," Gabrielle instructed, "and contact Samuel. We need emergency capital for materials to scale production." For the next 48 hours, Gabrielle barely slept, coordinating with disaster response teams and arranging emergency shipments. The triplets remained at her side much of this time, Alexander organizing delivery schedules with surprising efficiency, Marcus calculating load requirements for different facilities, and William silently reprogramming the management interfaces for simplified emergency use. On the 3rd day of the crisis, with the first Horizon units successfully deployed to 3 hospitals in the disaster zone, Gabrielle's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Ms. Johnson, this is Catherine Bailey from WCBN News. We're doing a live report from Memorial Hospital in Sacramento, where your technology has kept the ICU operational after generator failure. Would you be available for a remote interview?" Within hours, Gabrielle found herself on national television, explaining in clear, accessible terms how Horizon's storage units functioned and why they were ideal for crisis situations. Unlike traditional backup systems, our technology stores energy efficiently and releases it steadily without requiring fuel resupply, she explained. The units are also modular, meaning they can be transported and installed quickly in emergency conditions. By the end of the week, Horizon had become the unexpected hero of the disaster response. As power restoration efforts continued, Gabrielle received another call, this one from a familiar area code. "Ms. Johnson, my name is Richard Whitmore, Vice President of Acquisitions at Maxwell Investments." The name sent an electric jolt through her body. "Our CEO is very interested in your technology and would like to discuss potential partnership opportunities." Gabrielle's grip tightened on the phone. "Maxwell Investments," she repeated, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm familiar with your company." "Excellent. We could arrange a meeting at your earliest convenience. Our executive team would fly to you, of course." 3 days later, Gabrielle sat across from 3 Maxwell executives in Horizon's conference room. She had chosen her outfit carefully, a structured burgundy dress that projected authority without ostentation. "Your response to the Western crisis has been impressive," began Whitmore, flanked by 2 younger executives in identical Navy suits. "Maxwell Investments has been expanding our renewable energy portfolio, and your storage technology would be an excellent addition." As they discussed technical specifications and market positioning, Gabrielle noticed one of the younger executives studying her with a furrowed brow. "Have we met before, Ms. Johnson?" he asked during a pause in the conversation. "You seem familiar." "I don't believe so," Gabrielle replied evenly, though she recognized him as Jonathan's former assistant who had occasionally seen her cleaning the penthouse office. The acquisition offer, when presented, was substantial. $70 million for Horizon Technologies, with Gabrielle retained as a division head. "I appreciate your interest," she responded, closing the presentation folder. "However, Horizon is not for sale, especially not to Maxwell Investments." The executives exchanged glances. "Perhaps you should consider the offer more carefully," Whitmore suggested. "The energy sector requires substantial capital to scale, capital that Maxwell can provide immediately." "We've managed quite well without Maxwell's capital thus far," Gabrielle replied, rising to indicate the meeting's conclusion, "and will continue to do so." That evening, as the triplets completed homework at the kitchen table of their modest Queen's apartment, A news segment featured Jonathan Maxwell discussing the energy crisis. Gabrielle's hand froze over the salad she was preparing. Maxwell Investments has always been at the forefront of emerging markets, Jonathan stated confidently on screen. Our renewable energy division is positioned to provide long-term solutions to infrastructure vulnerabilities exposed by this crisis. Alexander looked up from his notebook. "Mom, why do you always change the channel when that man comes on?" Gabrielle reached for the remote. "Just not interested in his perspective," she answered, switching to a cooking show. Later that night, after the boys were asleep, her phone rang again. This time it was the Department of Energy. "Ms. Johnson, I'm calling regarding an emergency procurement initiative. We need 10,000 storage units deployed across critical infrastructure within 30 days. Is that possible?" Gabrielle's mind raced through inventory, supply chains, production capacity. It's ambitious, but yes, it's possible. By dawn, Horizon's entire team had assembled to reconfigure their production strategy. Gabrielle stood before a whiteboard covered in logistics diagrams, her sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back. "This will require round-the-clock production and additional assembly space," she explained. "But this is exactly what we built Horizon for. Solutions when they're needed most." 2 weeks later, Gabrielle signed the government contract in Horizon's conference room, the largest deal in the company's history. The moment her pen left the paper, she flashed back to signing housing assistance forms when the triplets were infants, the same determined grip on the pen, but circumstances transformed by sheer force of will. As the government representatives departed, her team opened champagne bottles, the modest celebration a stark contrast to the magnitude of their achievement. "To Horizon," Dr. Zhang toasted, raising her glass. "And," Gabrielle added with a smile that contained years of private satisfaction, "to the next time Maxwell Investments is mentioned in this building, which will only be because they're trying desperately to copy what we've already perfected." While the headlines celebrated Horizon's miraculous solution to the energy crisis, Gabrielle couldn't imagine that in less than 2 years she would be standing on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, ringing the opening bell in the same building where Jonathan once lunched with his financial elite. While the headlines celebrated Horizon's miraculous solution to the energy crisis, Gabrielle couldn't imagine that in less than 2 years she would be standing on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, ringing the opening bell in the same building where Jonathan once lunched with his financial elite. Yet that possibility now loomed before her, tangible and imminent. The chartered jet hummed steadily as it cut through clouds above the Midwest. Gabrielle reviewed her presentation notes while her executive team discussed strategy across the aisle. The leather seats and polished wood tables of the aircraft, rented specifically for their roadshow, represented a calculated expense. Image mattered in these circles. The Chicago investors seemed receptive, noted Janet Kim, now Horizon's CFO. But New York will be different. Wall Street has its own rules. Gabrielle nodded, adjusting the cuff of her new blazer, not Armani or Chanel, but a well-crafted theory piece that projected the right balance of success and restraint. They'll question everything: our growth projections, our technological edge, and most of all, me. In the conference room of Morgan Stanley's headquarters the following morning, that prediction proved accurate. 5 investment bankers in bespoke suits studied Horizon's prospectus with expressions ranging from skepticism to thinly veiled condescension. "Your technology has performed admirably during crisis situations," acknowledged the lead banker, a silver-haired man named Harrison. "But the market has no precedent for scaling sustainable energy storage at this valuation, especially under leadership with your particular background." The slight hesitation spoke volumes. Your particular background. A single mother. A former cleaning lady. A woman without Ivy League credentials. Before Gabrielle could respond, Alexander's voice cut through the tension. "Actually, sir, if you'll look at page 17, you'll see our projected growth follows a modified Fibonacci sequence that accounts for infrastructure adoption rates." All heads turned toward the 10-year-old boy who had been quietly sitting at the corner of the table with his brothers, supposedly working on their own projects while their mother conducted business. Alexander, undeterred by the sudden attention, continued. Your projections underestimate municipal contracts by approximately 22% based on current legislative trends. Harrison blinked, clearly unprepared for a child to challenge his financial models. Marcus, typically quiet in business settings, adjusted his glasses and added, The graphical representation on page 38 demonstrates this more clearly if the logarithmic scale is properly considered. William, who had been programming something on his tablet, silently turned the screen to display a dynamic visualization of Horizon's market penetration, a more elegant and intuitive presentation than the static charts in the prospectus. The banker's expressions shifted from dismissive to bewildered to intrigued. Gabrielle allowed herself a small smile. My sons occasionally contribute interesting perspectives to our work, she said simply. 3 days later, at a fundraising dinner for clean energy initiatives, Gabrielle found herself seated next to Senator James Harrington, a rising political star known for his passionate advocacy of environmental legislation. The Horizon storage units deployed during the Western crisis saved hundreds of lives, he noted, his deep voice carrying genuine admiration. I've visited 3 hospitals that maintained critical care solely because of your technology. Gabrielle, dressed in a midnight blue cocktail dress she'd splurged on for these networking events, studied the senator with interest. At 45, Harrington possessed both the polished charm of a career politician and the authentic passion of someone who believed in his causes. Technology only matters when it serves human needs, she replied. We designed our systems specifically for critical infrastructure resilience. That's exactly the perspective this country needs, Harrington said, leaning closer. Too many tech companies chase innovation without purpose. Your technology has both. Their conversation continued well past dessert, moving from energy policy to educational reform. When Harrington mentioned his own single parenthood, raising a daughter after his wife's death from cancer, Gabrielle felt an unexpected connection. Later that week, as the roadshow continued, Gabrielle spotted a familiar profile while dining at Le Bernardin. Jonathan Maxwell sat across the restaurant, entertaining clients, his Vanderbilt wife conspicuously absent. A gold watch flashed on his wrist as he gestured animatedly, commanding attention from his audience. For a moment, their eyes met across the crowded space. Jonathan's expression flickered with confusion. Something familiar about the elegant woman in the corner booth, but unable to place her. Gabrielle held his gaze just long enough to register recognition dawning in his eyes before deliberately turning back to her dinner companions. The waiter approached moments later. Madam, your bill has been taken care of by another patron. Gabrielle smiled coolly. Please return to that patron and inform him that I prefer to pay my own way, always. The morning of the IPO, Gabrielle stood in her hotel suite considering her reflection. The Chanel suit, her first truly luxury purchase, was a statement of arrival. Classic black with subtle texture, it represented not excess but precision, excellence, standards. The triplets emerged from their adjoining room, already dressed in matching navy suits tailored to their slender frames. At 10, they carried themselves with remarkable poise, their natural intelligence tempered by the humble values Gabrielle had instilled despite their increasingly privileged circumstances. Ready to make history? She asked, adjusting William's tie. Alexander grinned. Ready to ring the bell? Ready to increase our market capitalization by an estimated 30% by day's end? Marcus added with characteristic precision. William simply nodded, his quiet confidence speaking volumes. The floor of the New York Stock Exchange hummed with anticipation. Traders in colorful jackets moved like schools of fish across the trading floor, while executives and photographers gathered near the balcony where the opening bell ceremony would take place. As they were escorted to the platform, Gabrielle felt a surreal disconnect. 7 years earlier, she had stood outside this very building, pregnant and abandoned, watching financial elites stream in and out while she wondered how she would afford her next meal. Now those same elites applauded as she approached the podium, the triplets maintaining perfect composure despite the cameras and commotion. When her hand gripped the bell, Gabrielle allowed herself one moment of reflection, from cleaning floors to opening markets, before pressing firmly. The sound reverberated through the exchange, signaling not just the start of trading but the culmination of an improbable journey. Horizon Technologies opened at $28 per share, exceeded $30 by mid-morning, and closed at $42, a valuation of just over $2 billion. Gabrielle Johnson, the former cleaning lady from the Bronx, was now worth over $400 million on paper. That evening, a celebration dinner in a private room at the Four Seasons featured the Horizon executive team, early investors including Samuel Chen, and a surprise guest, Senator Harrington, who arrived with a bouquet of rare orchids. "I was in Washington when I heard the news," he explained, kissing Gabrielle's cheek with perhaps more warmth than mere professional congratulations warranted. "Couldn't miss celebrating properly." 2 weeks later, Gabrielle stood in an empty house in a quiet neighborhood of Westchester County. Sunlight streamed through large windows, illuminating hardwood floors and built-in bookshelves. At 5,000 square feet, it was spacious without being ostentatious, with a large yard backing onto protected woodland. "What do you think?" she asked the triplets, who were already exploring eagerly. "It has perfect acoustics," noted Alexander from the living room. "Southern exposure for optimal natural lighting," observed Marcus from the bay window. "The basement could be converted to a proper laboratory," William added, already measuring dimensions with his eyes. The real estate agent smiled indulgently. "Your sons have unique priorities for children their age." "They have unique minds," Gabrielle corrected gently. That night, after signing the purchase agreement for a house she paid for in cash, a transaction that would have seemed impossible when she slept in shelters while pregnant, Gabrielle unpacked an old cardboard box containing mementos from their journey. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, lay the torn fragments of Jonathan's check, preserved as a reminder. Beneath them, a photograph from the triplets' christening. 3 identical babies in white gowns, Eleanor beaming beside them. Alexander found her sitting on the floor of their hotel suite. These memories spread before her. "Mom?" he asked, Marcus and William appearing behind him as if summoned. "What's that?" Gabrielle carefully gathered the items. "Just some old memories." Marcus, ever observant, picked up the christening photo. "Why don't we have a father like our friends do?" The question hung in the air, inevitable, yet still catching Gabrielle unprepared. She patted the carpet beside her, and the boys sat in a semicircle, their expressions serious. "Your father wasn't ready to be a father," she began carefully. "He made choices that meant he wouldn't be part of our lives." "Did he die?" William asked quietly. "No," Gabrielle answered truthfully. "He just wasn't prepared for the responsibility of you. But one day, when you're older, I'll tell you the whole story." As she tucked the old photo away, Gabrielle didn't imagine that in just 5 years, her path and Jonathan's would cross again, this time with her occupying the seat of power he had once used to humiliate her. As she tucked the old photo away, Gabrielle didn't imagine that in just 5 years, her path and Jonathan's would cross again, this time with her occupying the seat of power he had once used to humiliate her. Yet here she was, a different woman entirely. The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Gabrielle's office at Horizon Technologies' headquarters in Silicon Valley. The sleek, sustainable campus stretched below, 5 buildings arranged around a central courtyard with living walls and solar panels that doubled as shade structures. From her vantage point on the top floor, she could see hundreds of employees crossing between buildings, their collective brilliance now harnessed toward a single vision: hers. "Ms. Johnson," her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your 9 o'clock video conference is ready. Tokyo, London, and Sao Paulo are all connected. Gabrielle straightened the lapel of her crimson blazer, the emerald brooch, symbolizing her first patent, catching the light as she moved. At 38, she carried herself with the assurance of someone who had not just entered rooms of power but had built them herself. "Thank you, Claire. I'll be right there." In the conference room, wall-sized screens displayed executives from 3 continents, all awaiting her direction on Horizon's latest global expansion. The company, now valued at $9 billion, had revolutionized energy storage worldwide. "Good morning, everyone," Gabrielle began, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had become her trademark. "Let's begin with the Tokyo deployment schedule." Halfway through the presentation, the door opened quietly and Alexander slipped in. At 15, he had grown into a striking young man with his mother's determination and a jawline that sometimes caught Gabrielle off guard with its resemblance to Jonathan. He waited for a natural pause before approaching. "Mom, I found that equation that was bothering you," he whispered, sliding a tablet toward her. On screen was an elegant mathematical solution to a thermal efficiency problem that had stalled one of their development teams for weeks. Gabrielle scanned it quickly, her expression softening with pride. "Brilliant! Has William implemented it in the code yet?" As if summoned by the mention of his name, William's face appeared on a smaller screen that blinked to life on the conference table. "Just finished," he confirmed, his voice deeper than it had been even months earlier. "Running simulations now, but preliminary results show a 17% improvement." In his personal laboratory at their Woodside estate, William had surrounded himself with multiple monitors displaying complex code structures. The quietest of the triplets had developed an intuitive understanding of programming that routinely astonished MIT professors who consulted for Horizon. "Perfect timing," Gabrielle replied, seamlessly integrating this development into her presentation to the international team. "As you can see, our next-generation storage systems will exceed efficiency projections by nearly 20%. After the conference concluded, Alexander lingered, scrolling through messages on his phone. "Oh, Mom," he said casually, though his eyes betrayed his excitement, "our MIT results came in. All 3 of us were accepted. Full scholarships." Gabrielle felt her chest tighten with emotion. The journey to this moment flashed through her mind. The shelter where she'd slept while pregnant, the tiny apartment where all 4 had shared one bedroom, the countless nights studying while the boys slept. "That's extraordinary," she managed, her voice steady despite the swell of pride. "Have you told your brothers?" "Marcus is calculating the statistical improbability of triplets all being accepted with identical scholarship offers," Alexander chuckled. "You know how he gets with numbers." Later that afternoon, Gabrielle sat in her private conference room reviewing the quarterly reports. Horizon now employed over 2,000 people across 12 countries. Their energy storage technology powered hospitals, data centers, and critical infrastructure globally. The humanitarian division Alexander supervised had deployed emergency systems to disaster zones on 4 continents, impacting hundreds of thousands of lives. The screen on her wall displayed news headlines about the industry. A smaller item caught her attention. Maxwell Investments struggles with Asian market downturn. The accompanying photo showed Jonathan at a shareholders' meeting, his expression strained, hair now streaked with premature gray. Gabrielle studied him dispassionately. According to financial reports, Maxwell Investments had lost significant market share over the past 3 years. Jonathan's aggressive expansion into Asian markets had backfired when the regional economy faltered. His much-publicized divorce from his Vanderbilt wife had further complicated both his personal reputation and his company's stability. Her assistant's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Ms. Johnson, reminder about the inauguration ceremony for the Maxwell Technology Center in New York tomorrow. Shall I confirm your attendance as the keynote speaker?" Gabrielle's finger hovered over the intercom button. The Maxwell Technology Center. She knew Maxwell Investments had diversified into technology in recent years, a desperate attempt to maintain relevance in a rapidly changing market. What she hadn't expected was to be invited to inaugurate their project. For a moment, she was transported back 15 years, to the day security had escorted her from Jonathan's office, his contemptuous words still burning in her ears. "People like you are temporary in the lives of people like me." "Yes," she decided, pressing the button. "Confirm. And schedule the jet to depart tonight. The boys will come with me." Alexander appeared in her doorway minutes later, his intuitive sense for important developments as sharp as ever. "You didn't mention a New York trip at breakfast." Gabrielle closed the news screen showing Jonathan's face. "It came up recently. An inauguration ceremony I've been asked to speak at." "Must be important if we're all going," he observed, studying his mother's expression. "The Maxwell Technology Center? I saw it on your calendar." "It's just another opening," she replied, maintaining the perfect composure she had cultivated over years. "But it will be a good opportunity for you three to meet key Wall Street figures before you start at MIT." What Gabrielle didn't reveal was that, for the first time in 15 years, she would be face-to-face with Jonathan Maxwell III. She had tracked his trajectory from a distance. The Vanderbilt marriage, the scandalous divorce 5 years later, the gradual deterioration of the Maxwell empire under his reckless management. In her private bathroom, Gabrielle studied her reflection as she refreshed her makeup. The years had been kind to her, each line earned through determination rather than defeat. Her wardrobe, once consisting of discount store finds carefully maintained, now featured custom pieces from designers who courted her patronage. Her phone buzzed with a message from Senator Harrington. "Dinner when you're back from New York? Have something important to discuss." Their relationship had evolved gradually over 3 years, from professional admiration to friendship to something deeper. The senator, respected for his integrity as much as his political acumen, had become a steady presence in their lives, his own daughter now at Stanford forming a bond with the triplets. "Looking forward to it," she replied, a small smile playing at her lips. That evening, as her team prepared details for the trip, Gabrielle stood at her office window overlooking the Horizon campus. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the buildings where hundreds of employees worked on projects that would transform the global energy landscape. Her empire now valued 3 times more than Maxwell Investments. In the reflection of the glass, she could see the photographs arranged on her credenza, the triplets at their middle school graduation, Eleanor, now semi-retired but still on Horizon's board, Senator Harrington and Gabrielle at a White House energy summit. "Ms. Johnson," her assistant called from the doorway, "your car is ready whenever you are. The jet is prepared for departure." Gabrielle nodded, gathering her tablet and coat. As she walked through the executive floor, employees nodded respectfully, some still working despite the evening hour. "You were wrong about everything, Jonathan," she murmured to herself as the elevator descended. "Absolutely everything." While her executive team reviewed the trip logistics, Gabrielle gazed out the jet window at the Horizon campus receding below, unaware that within 48 hours, the carefully constructed barriers between her past and present would completely collapse. While her executive team reviewed the trip logistics, Gabrielle gazed out the jet window at the Horizon campus receding below, unaware that within 48 hours, the carefully constructed barriers between her past and present would completely collapse. The Horizon private jet touched down at Teterboro Airport just after 9 in the evening. A sleek black SUV with tinted windows waited on the tarmac, the driver holding a discreet sign with the Horizon logo. No names necessary. In New York, Gabrielle Johnson was now recognizable enough to warrant privacy precautions. "The Four Seasons has your penthouse suite prepared, Ms. Johnson," the driver informed her as the triplets settled into the vehicle, William immediately connecting his tablet to the car's Wi-Fi, Marcus calculating their estimated arrival time based on current traffic patterns, and Alexander texting the Horizon New York office to confirm tomorrow's schedule. Not the Four Seasons, Gabrielle corrected. The West Side Grand. The driver looked surprised. The West Side Grand? It's a fine hotel, but not your usual. It's where we're staying, she said with finality, her tone leaving no room for discussion. What Gabrielle didn't explain was that 15 years ago, the West Side Grand was where she had worked the night shift as a pregnant receptionist, where Eleanor Richards had first noticed her reading a programming textbook between check-ins, where her life had begun its transformation. As their convoy pulled up to the hotel's entrance, Gabrielle observed the doormen rushing to attention, the manager appearing as if conjured by magic. The same revolving doors she had once polished during slow periods now spun to welcome her as an honored guest. "Ms. Johnson, welcome to the West Side Grand," the manager effused, leading them personally to the elevators. "We've prepared our presidential suite for you and your family." Inside the lavish suite, the triplets immediately claimed their spaces. Alexander at the dining table converting it to a workstation, Marcus examining the view with comments about optimal light angles, William silently testing the Wi-Fi bandwidth. "I need everyone assembled in 30 minutes, Gabrielle announced. "We have a strategy session before tomorrow's events." When her executive team arrived, they spread documents across the suite's living room. Janet Kim, Horizon's CFO, reviewed the presentation points for tomorrow's speech. Dr. Zhang provided technical briefings on questions that might arise from industry analysts. "One more item," Gabrielle said after they'd covered the scheduled agenda. She nodded to Janet, who distributed sealed folders to the senior team members. "These contain confidential information regarding our position with Maxwell Investments." The executives opened their folders, expressions shifting from curiosity to shock. 26%? Janet whispered. "We've acquired 26% of Maxwell Investments?" Gabrielle nodded. "Through various holding companies and investment vehicles over the past 18 months. As of this morning, Horizon Technologies is the largest single shareholder of Maxwell Investments." Dr. Zhang removed her glasses, clearly processing implications. "This means at the next board meeting, we can force a restructuring vote," Gabrielle finished. "Their quarterly results have been disastrous. The board is already nervous." One executive leaned forward. "Does Maxwell know?" "He will tomorrow," Gabrielle replied, her voice betraying no emotion. "The SEC filing becomes public at 9 a.m., 1 hour before my keynote at his technology center." After the team departed to prepare for tomorrow, Gabrielle found the triplets in deep conversation on the suite's terrace. At 15, they had developed the habit of conducting their own strategy sessions, analyzing problems from their unique perspectives. "You're unusually interested in this particular event," Alexander observed as she joined them. Gabrielle sat beside her sons, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. The building where she had once cleaned Jonathan's office was visible from their vantage point, its distinctive silhouette among the skyscrapers a reminder of how far they had come. "Tomorrow is important," she acknowledged. "Let's make sure we're properly prepared." The morning of the inauguration dawned clear and bright. Gabrielle selected her outfit with particular care, a tailored white suit with subtle gold accents, the emerald brooch at her lapel, and a pair of Christian Louboutin heels that added 3 inches to her height. Her hair, styled in a sophisticated updo, completed the image of polished success. The triplets emerged from their rooms in perfectly coordinated charcoal suits, custom-made by the same London tailor who dressed European royalty. "The Bloomberg alert just came through," Alexander announced, holding up his phone. "Maxwell Investments stock is already reacting to the disclosure." The motorcade delivered them to the Maxwell Technology Center precisely at 10:30. The new building occupied an entire block on Fifth Avenue, blue and gold Maxwell flags fluttering at the entrances. Press and VIP guests crowded the reception area, a who's who of Wall Street and Silicon Valley converging for the event. As they approached the entrance, cameras turned in their direction, recognition rippling through the crowd. Gabrielle paused momentarily, allowing photographers to capture her arrival, a calculated move to ensure her presence would dominate coverage of Jonathan's big day. Inside, conversations hushed as they moved through the atrium. Gabrielle nodded graciously to familiar faces, CEOs, investors, politicians, many of whom subtly adjusted their posture in her presence, the unconscious deference paid to true power. From across the room, through the shifting crowd, she caught her first glimpse of Jonathan Maxwell III in 15 years. At 47, his once boyish features had hardened, stress lines etching his forehead, gray streaking his temples. He was adjusting his Hermes tie in a reflective surface, unaware of her arrival. She observed him with clinical detachment, noting how his shoulders stooped slightly, how his movements betrayed an anxiety absent from the arrogant young man who had dismissed her from his life. A wave of whispers announced her presence to those nearest Jonathan. He turned, scanning the crowd with confusion until his eyes locked on Gabrielle. The moment stretched between them, 15 years collapsing into a single heartbeat. His face drained of color, mouth parting slightly in disbelief. Gabrielle held his gaze steadily, her expression revealing nothing while his displayed everything, shock, recognition, and the dawning horror of understanding as his eyes moved from her face to the three young men beside her. His assistant approached, oblivious to the silent exchange. "Mr. Maxwell, all guests have arrived, including Ms. Johnson, the keynote speaker." Jonathan struggled to compose himself. "Johnson?" he repeated hoarsely. "Gabrielle Johnson, CEO of Horizon Technologies," the assistant clarified, looking concerned. "Sir, are you feeling all right? You look pale." The chairman of Maxwell's board intercepted Gabrielle before Jonathan could approach. "Ms. Johnson, what an honor to finally meet you," he said, pumping her hand enthusiastically. "Your company's innovations have transformed the industry." "Thank you," she replied warmly. "Horizon believes in building technology that serves humanity's needs." "Allow me to introduce our CEO," the chairman continued, gesturing toward Jonathan, who had managed to navigate through the crowd. "Jonathan Maxwell III." It was a surreal introduction. Two people who had shared the most intimate connection now pretending to be strangers. Gabrielle extended her hand with studied elegance. "Mr. Maxwell, your reputation precedes you." Jonathan attempted to speak, but only a strangled sound emerged. Recovering, he took her hand with visibly trembling fingers. "Ms. Johnson," he managed finally. "Welcome to Maxwell Technologies." "These are my sons," Gabrielle continued smoothly, her smile never wavering. "Alexander leads our philanthropic foundation, Marcus is our mathematics genius, and William is responsible for our quantum coding innovations. All three were just accepted to MIT." The triplets, poised and articulate, greeted the man who had no idea he was their biological father. Jonathan stared, transfixed by the unmistakable resemblance. Not just physical traits, but mannerisms, the way Alexander tilted his head when curious. Expressions Jonathan recognized from his own mirror. "Impressive," he murmured, his voice strained. "They're twins?" "Triplets, actually," Alexander corrected politely. "We were born the same day Mom registered her first patent. She always says it was the day her life truly began." While the guests applauded her inspirational keynote address, Gabrielle knew the real confrontation was yet to come. In less than 24 hours, the Maxwell board would vote on his future, and Jonathan Maxwell would finally understand the true price of abandonment. While the guests applauded her inspirational keynote address, Gabrielle stepped away from the podium, her expression revealing nothing of the storm brewing within. She navigated through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting congratulations from industry leaders who had once dismissed her proposals. Throughout it all, she felt Jonathan's eyes following her, his desperation almost palpable across the room. She had nearly reached the exit when his voice, strained but insistent, came from behind her. "Gabrielle, please, we need to talk." Turning slowly, she faced the man who had shattered her world 15 years ago. The crowded reception hall continued to buzz around them, but a small bubble of tension isolated them from the celebration. "About what, Mr. Maxwell?" she asked, her voice professionally pleasant. "Not here," he whispered urgently. "Somewhere private. About the boys." Gabrielle considered refusing, but a subtle nod from Alexander across the room, always attuned to emotional undercurrents, gave her pause. 5 minutes. The terrace. The building's 10th-floor terrace offered panoramic views of Manhattan, empty now as attendees enjoyed the reception inside. Jonathan paced nervously, stopping abruptly when Gabrielle emerged through the glass doors. "Are they mine?" he demanded without preamble, his voice cracking. "The triplets, they're my sons, aren't they?" Gabrielle's expression remained impassive. "Biologically speaking, yes." Jonathan ran a trembling hand through his graying hair. "My God, all this time, why didn't you tell me? I had a right to know." Something cold and sharp crystallized in Gabrielle's chest. "Tell you? I tried to tell you, Jonathan. You called security to escort me out of your building. That was before I knew." "Before you knew what?" she interrupted, her composure slipping for the first time. "Before you knew they would turn out brilliant? Before you knew they'd be accepted to MIT? Before you knew they'd be worth claiming?" Jonathan flinched as if struck. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Gabrielle's laugh held no humor. "You told me people like me were temporary in the lives of people like you. You said I was dull, predictable, without refinement. You handed me a check for $50,000 to solve my problem." He had the decency to look ashamed. "I was a different person then. Young, arrogant. And I was pregnant, terrified, and alone," she finished for him. "Your exact words were, you really thought a Maxwell would mix with someone from the Bronx?" "Well, surprise, Jonathan. 3 Maxwells did exactly that, and they've turned out extraordinary without your name or your money." Before he could respond, the terrace door opened, and William appeared. The quietest Triplet's timing had always been impeccable. "Mom, Senator Harrington just arrived," he said softly. "He brought that ring you liked in Paris." Jonathan's gaze shifted to the distinguished silver-haired man entering the reception, his political star having risen steadily over the years they'd known each other. "Your fiancé?" Jonathan asked, the word clearly painful to articulate. "My future husband," Gabrielle corrected. "We met when he approved federal funding for my first major project. He believed in me when no one else did." She paused deliberately. "Unlike you, he sees value in people beyond their immediate utility." The senator approached, kissing Gabrielle affectionately before extending his hand to Jonathan. "Maxwell, finally, we meet in person. Congratulations on the center, though I must confess I'm more impressed with the announcement that just hit Bloomberg about Horizon acquiring 26% of Maxwell Investments." Jonathan's face drained of color. "What? Oh, you weren't informed." The senator appeared genuinely surprised. "I assumed that was why Gabrielle was speaking today. Horizon purchased all available shares on the market this morning. From what I understand, the board votes next week on restructuring the executive leadership." As Jonathan processed this devastating blow, Gabrielle maintained her serene smile. "Business is business, Jonathan. I'm sure a man of your caliber understands that perfectly." The following morning, Gabrielle's photo dominated the Wall Street Journal's front page. "From Cleaner to Conqueror: How Gabrielle Johnson Revolutionized Silicon Valley and Now Threatens Wall Street," declared the headline. The article detailed Horizon's strategic acquisition of Maxwell shares, speculating about the company's plans for its newest investment. In her hotel suite, Gabrielle reviewed the morning's press while the triplets prepared for their scheduled tour of MIT. A notification on her tablet alerted her to an emergency meeting called by Maxwell's board, moved up from next week to this afternoon. "Ms. Johnson," her assistant called from the doorway. "Mr. Maxwell is in the lobby insisting on seeing you. Security is prepared to remove him if you prefer." Alexander looked up from his breakfast. Maybe you should see him, Mom. Get everything resolved before we leave for Boston. Marcus nodded. Statistically speaking, unresolved emotional confrontations tend to resurface at inopportune moments. William, as usual, said nothing but tilted his head in silent agreement with his brothers. Gabrielle considered her son's advice. Send him up, she decided. Jonathan arrived disheveled, his bespoke suit wrinkled as if he'd slept in it, dark circles shadowing his eyes. The contrast between his haggard appearance and Gabrielle's immaculate composure couldn't have been starker. The board meeting, he began without greeting. They're voting on my removal this afternoon. Yes, I'm aware, Gabrielle replied calmly. Did you plan this from the beginning? He demanded, pacing the suite's living room. Was everything, building Horizon, the acquisition, all to destroy me? The triplets exchanged glances before Alexander spoke. We'll give you privacy, he said, guiding his brothers toward their rooms. Once alone, Gabrielle studied the man who had once wielded such power over her. Not everything is about you, Jonathan. I built Horizon because I had 3 children to support and brilliant ideas the world needed. But the acquisition was a sound business decision. Maxwell has valuable patents that complement our technology. Jonathan collapsed onto the sofa, head in his hands. They're going to remove me. 4 generations of Maxwells ended with me. Perhaps you should have considered legacy before making decisions based solely on convenience and prejudice, Gabrielle suggested, her voice cool but not cruel. A heavy silence stretched between them before Jonathan looked up, his expression haunted. The boys, I want to know them. They're my sons too. That decision isn't mine anymore, Gabrielle replied. They're 15. Old enough to decide for themselves if they want a relationship with you. A knock at the door interrupted them. William entered, holding a tablet. The car is ready whenever you are, Mom. MIT's dean is expecting us at 3. As Gabrielle gathered her things, Jonathan made one final desperate appeal. Please, Gabrielle, just a chance to know them. She paused at the door. You know what's ironic, Jonathan? If you had shown me even a fraction of basic human decency 15 years ago, things might have been different. I never wanted to keep them from you. You kept yourself from them when you decided we weren't worth your time. That afternoon, as Gabrielle and the triplets toured MIT's campus, Jonathan faced the Maxwell board. The vote was unanimous, 10-0 in favor of his removal as CEO. His father's portrait seemed to glare down at him from the boardroom wall as the chairman delivered the verdict. Later that evening, Gabrielle received a message from Alexander. Had coffee with Jonathan Maxwell today. My decision, not yours to make. We talked. We'll tell you about it when you're ready to hear. The notification staggered her. While she had been meeting with MIT administrators, her oldest son had independently sought out his biological father. When they returned to the hotel, Alexander was waiting. His brothers retreated tactfully, leaving mother and son alone. Why? She asked simply. Alexander shrugged, suddenly looking younger than his 15 years. Curiosity. I wanted to see the man behind the story for myself. And what did you see? A broken man who made a terrible mistake, Alexander replied thoughtfully. He asked why you never told him about us. I showed him the photo of the torn check you kept. Gabrielle closed her eyes, processing this unexpected development. I never wanted you to hate him, Alexander. That's why I waited to tell you the truth. I don't hate him, her son said carefully, but I told him something that seemed to hit him harder than your acquisition ever could. What was that? Alexander's eyes, so like Jonathan's in shape but containing all of Gabrielle's wisdom, met hers steadily. I told him you offered $50,000 to solve your problem, but our education has cost $1.2 million each. While Alexander left to join his brothers, Gabrielle remained seated, finally understanding that her greatest revenge wasn't the acquisition of Maxwell Investments, but raising three extraordinary young men who could face their father's rejection with more dignity than he had shown in abandoning them. While Alexander left to join his brothers, Gabrielle remained seated, her son's words echoing in her mind. The symmetry was perfect. 50,000 to make them disappear, 1.2 million each to become who they were meant to be. Some equations balanced themselves over time. The morning headlines announced what business insiders already knew. Maxwell ousted. Board votes unanimously to remove fourth-generation CEO. Accompanying photographs showed Jonathan leaving the Maxwell building, personal effects in a cardboard box, the universal symbol of corporate disgrace. In her hotel suite, Gabrielle reviewed the final acquisition documents prepared by Horizon's legal team. The terms were generous yet firm. The Maxwell name would remain on historical divisions, preserving the century-old legacy while integrating the company's viable assets into Horizon's expanding portfolio. A knock at the door revealed Senator Harrington, earlier than expected for their breakfast meeting. "Thought you might want company reviewing those," he said, gesturing to the documents. His silver hair caught the morning light, his eyes warm with understanding. In 3 years, he had never once asked her to explain her complicated history with Maxwell, sensing it was territory she would share when ready. "The board approved our terms," she said, accepting his gentle kiss. "The Maxwell Investment Group will become a subsidiary of Horizon Technologies by next quarter." Harrington sat beside her, his presence steady and calming. A remarkable achievement, though I suspect this particular acquisition carried personal significance. Gabrielle met his gaze. "More than I've admitted." That evening, she gathered the triplets for dinner in the suite. The mood was unusually solemn as they settled around the table, the Manhattan skyline glittering beyond the windows. "I think it's time we had a family discussion about recent events," Gabrielle began, "and about our future." Alexander straightened, always the first to engage. "About Jonathan Maxwell and our relationship to him?" "Yes," Gabrielle nodded, "and about how we want to handle this as a family." Marcus, analytical as ever, removed his glasses and polished them methodically. "I've been considering the implications. Our birth certificates list father unknown, but given recent developments, there are practical considerations regarding inheritance, social connections, and historical lineage." William, who had remained silent throughout most of these developments, finally spoke. "The Maxwell name carries weight in certain circles. Adopting it formally would acknowledge biological reality without compromising who we are." Gabrielle studied her sons, marveling at their maturity. "You're considering taking his name?" "Johnson Maxwell," Alexander clarified. "A hyphenated acknowledgement of both realities. You are who raised us, who sacrificed everything, but he is part of our genetic makeup for better or worse." Marcus nodded in agreement. From a purely logical standpoint, adopting the Maxwell surname as a hyphenate provides access to a historical legacy without surrendering the Johnson identity that defines our true values. "He's biologically our father," William added softly. "But you're who made us who we are. That will never change." Gabrielle felt tears threatening, a rare occurrence. "This decision belongs to you three. I won't stand in your way if that's what you want." Alexander reached for her hand. "We thought you might resist the idea." 15 years ago I might have," she admitted. "But success isn't about erasing the past, it's about transforming it into something better." The conversation shifted when Senator Harrington joined them for dessert, bringing news from Washington about upcoming energy legislation. As the triplets engaged him in detailed policy discussions, Gabrielle observed the easy rapport they had developed with him over the years. Later, after the boys had retired to their rooms, Harrington lingered. On the terrace, overlooking the city where Gabrielle's journey had begun, he reached into his pocket. "I had planned something more elaborate," he confessed, "but after today's events, simplicity seems appropriate." He opened a small velvet box, revealing an emerald ring that echoed the brooch she always wore. the symbol of her first patent. Marry me, Gabriel. You, me, those extraordinary boys, and whatever comes next. The morning of the first meeting between the triplets and Jonathan was tense. They had agreed to a monthly dinner, no more, no less, to begin establishing some form of relationship. Gabrielle had recused herself, understanding this was their journey to navigate. "You don't have to do this," she reminded them as they prepared to leave. "We know," Alexander replied, adjusting his tie, "but curiosity is a powerful force." Marcus nodded. "Besides, understanding one's origins is statistically linked to better psychological outcomes." William simply squeezed her hand before following his brothers. When they returned 3 hours later, their expressions were contemplative but not distressed. "He cried," Alexander reported matter-of-factly, when William explained the quantum algorithm he's developing, said he barely passed calculus at Harvard. Marcus shrugged. He asked intelligent questions about our interests, made no claims of paternal authority, appropriate given the circumstances. "He's lonely," William observed quietly. "His office has our photographs from newspapers. He's been following our achievements for years." 2 weeks later, in the conference room of Horizon's New York office, Gabrielle signed the final merger documents creating Horizon Maxwell Energy Technologies. Across the table, the Maxwell board chairman, now reporting to Horizon's executive leadership, appeared both relieved and apprehensive. "The Maxwell name has endured for 120 years, he noted as the signing concluded. "I'm grateful it will continue even in this new form." Gabrielle nodded graciously. "Legacy matters. Adaptation ensures its survival." The wedding was deliberately intimate. 40 guests gathered at the Harrington family estate in Connecticut. Eleanor, now 70 and semi-retired but still sharp as ever, served as Gabrielle's matron of honor. The triplets, resplendent in matching suits, stood proudly as joint best men for the senator. "Who would have thought," Eleanor whispered as they prepared for the ceremony, "that the exhausted young woman from the West Side Grand would end up here?" Gabrielle squeezed her mentor's hand. "You did. You saw possibility when everyone else saw problems." As spring warmed into summer, the triplets prepared for their fall semester at MIT. Their monthly dinners with Jonathan continued, evolving gradually from awkward formality to cautious familiarity. He never asked for forgiveness, a wisdom perhaps born of his spectacular fall, but sought understanding through consistent presence. On a bright June morning, Gabrielle stood in the lobby of the former Ascent Tower, now part of the Horizon Maxwell portfolio. 15 years earlier, she had entered this building daily, uniform pressed, head lowered, invisible to the power brokers who worked there. Today, employees straightened as she passed. Security guards nodded respectfully. Executives stepped aside. The elevator ascended silently to the penthouse floor. Once Jonathan's domain, now converted to Horizon's New York executive offices. Her heels clicked across the marble flooring she had once scrubbed on hands and knees. Standing at the window where Jonathan had once kissed her against the Manhattan skyline, Gabrielle surveyed the city. Her city now. The view remained spectacular, but her perspective had transformed completely. Her assistant appeared at the door. "Ms. Johnson Harrington, your car is ready whenever you are. The triplets are waiting at the airport for the flight to Boston." As she gathered her belongings, Gabrielle's eyes fell on a framed photograph on her desk, herself flanked by the triplets at the Horizon Maxwell merger announcement, the 3 young men bearing the hyphenated surname that acknowledged both their origins and their journey. 15 years after being escorted from that very building, Gabrielle Johnson Harrington observed Manhattan from Jonathan's former office, not with bitterness or vengeance, but with the serene satisfaction of knowing her journey had completed a perfect cycle, proving not just to him, but to the world, that her value should never have been questioned. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.